Hello everyone. This is going to be now normally I usually stick to political quantum ontology, or I stick to metaphysical realism, or theological Mysterianism, or Satsism, or megaphology, or meritopology, etc., etc. But today I'm just going to launch into a very brief kind of ethno-sociological kind of perspective, or philosophical kind of perspective I have as a gifted learning difference woman, um, in a society that doesn't really always have the answers to the functionalities and ways of relating and being as a woman who is clearly not within the normativity kind of expectations that neurotypical society will have. So as a child, even as a child, I was very precocious. Like I was reading advanced nature magazines. I was fascinated by different cultures and countries, and that were, like distant islands, like Clipperton Island, heard in McDonald Island. I was very into, especially around the time I turned 12, 13, into transhumanism, Nick Bostrom, Andrew Sandberg, like all this futurism that allowed humanity to reigns into transcendence, into posthumanism and posthumanity. So I think, and even as a 7-year-old, I think I like playing with cars and kind of boyish action figures rather than anything. I should have never really liked anything dollish or feminine or girlish in a neurotypical sense. So I think people who obviously have different ways, and I don't like the word different because it's a bit of an underwhelming word, but people who have fundamentally different ways of relating to quanta and quantum realities, and not just quantum realities but the omnipresence of reality. Now so much of our society often plots, men and women against each other, and often the male is said to be picked by society, whether by some kind of hidden underground voting process of sociology. Now obviously sometimes the woman will dominate the man existentially or intellectually, but society does a very good job at obscurizing these kind of strong neurodivergent female voices that don't kind of bend down into the expectations of submissiveness and weakness and lack of independence, which are not virtues, they're vices. So why I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, we got to go beyond the notion of of what it means to be a transhumanist pioneer, whether it means creating thousands of artistic digital art pieces that will become invention prototypes, so write in highly fluidistically visual and visionary surrealist poetry, or philosophical contributions in some modality. We gotta look past strictly one's biological endowment with their kind of genetic makeup of whether they're female or male. And we gotta look past that, and we gotta look into the person's individualism of their qualia, the unification of all the mere topological experience they can ever possibly unificationally experience as a sum of all possible ethological aggregates within the monotopical monadic and and mere topological kind of fusions between noumenal and phenomenal that one sempiternally perceives. So the set of all symmetrities, the set of all destinies, the set of all realities. Now, a society that favoritistically only chooses, say, a woman, or only chooses a man in terms of by gender alone, is never going to see the full picture phenomenologically, and that is there will always be men who defy the notion of what it means to be gender essentialist or gender normative, and there will always be women who will define, Aristotle's kind of dogmas and taboos about female capacities. Now, clearly, Aristotle wasn't a Native American matriarch who had, some kind of spiritual cleansing and intelligence and giftedness that, these often ancient Grecian philosophers just didn't have towards women. So I think that we need to look as a society past, you know, reducing people into boxes like sex or uh race or gender. We need to come together as a critically thinking population. We need to come together as a fundamentally visionary population that will reinvent metaphysics, economics, ontology, epistemology. Now, does philosophy deserve to be fundamentally rewritten? Well, I think it does, because there's no kind of a ground alchemy written in stone meta reality that you have to be allegionistically committed to only certain models of justified true belief or justified systems of moral realism according to this one philosopher on YouTube rather than the set of all philosophers? Yeah, that's a good question. Is say you're kind of opposed to female extremity of intelligence. Well, what if you meet all possible female metaphysicians or epistemologists or philosophers across the universe? It's a good thought experiment, certainly when boundlessness is not limited to particularism always in the classical Aristotelian ontology sense. So I certainly think that this kind of intangible dance between the quaternions and the anions and the leptons and the bosons and the prions, all doing this harmonious dance within one's consciousness and consciogony, far transcends the mere genetic kind of structuralist endowment one has received via their kind of a more physicalization that they inherit. Temp- um, they inherit finitistically, or even ultra finitistically, in the context of absolute infinity. So maybe we should look past the notion of, whether somebody's a male or a female or this sex or that sex, and simply look into the notion of the person's intra-psychic kind of oasis or paradise or herbarium that they have to offer as in due labor with their knowledge capital. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, a lot of human beings have knowledge capital that's immense and have talents that would truly be harnessed into extraordinary capacities if fully utilized, and that often has a little to do with whether one is just essentialistically a male or female. It has more to do with the directionality of one's free will over the choice theory that they make progressing within a unit of time, or Minkowskian space-time. So I certainly think that creativity, intellect are not monopolized by one gender, one sex. I don't think that the Platonic universe lends itself to any kind of blind men and the elephant problem, where one subpart kind of domineers over the other subparts in a kind of in a gestalt ego dynamic psychology sense. So I think that the truth is that is there a truth? Is there an ultimate revolution in truth? Does there need to be a revolution of epistemic realism and quantum metaphysical realism as well? And how does this all relate to gender? Well, anybody who espouses evolutionary psychology only subscribes to a particular model of empiricism that does not always account for all phenomenologies omni-axiomatically or omni-axisally or omnidimensionally across the entire omniverse. The omnidimensional phenomenology really challenges categorialism and binaryism, which is very much integral to many philosopher and thinkers' thoughts. So I just want to say that certainly one must rock the boat and choose to be a creative, exercise the juices of their creativity to the fullest capacity, and the quantum entanglement between all possible worlds and say possible world relationships where in some world you are involved with that person you want to be with, then that can be a very possible world access reality via the possible world television. So I think the panpsychism of gender and sex, are the really substantially essentialistic differences, or much of it mediated by kind of sexual Freudian roles that are prescriptivized for large sections of the population, adult population, which unfortunately doesn't account for phenomenological hypersubjectivism and non-objectivism in phenomenology and phenomenological truth, theology, and realism. So, if I want to just kind of briefly conclude this video essay, would be that the next time you see a hyper feminine in a stereotypical sense man, or you see next time a hyper masculine woman in a stereotypical sense, maybe it's time you look past categories and gender and, mental objects and behaviors and thoughts and personalities and roles, all as belonging to inherentistically one gender, and ask, well, does essentialism actually exist across all possible worlds? And what does it truly mean to be a hyper compassionate being regardless of gender in terms of one's maximizing one's knowledge capital, as well as maximizing the hope and trust fund and the kind of the pillars that and caladiums that will become the reins of future hardship civilization? And why should one be a gender centrist versus just a modal realist kind of intra psychic individualist within every possible world? Now, is gender essentialism objective, or is it even super objective or pseudo objective? Well, gender really is a matter often of kind of a Saussurian, Barthesian kind of sign and reference semiotic transactional relation. But as you know, transactional and functionalism only account for the kind of the group or the group or order theory of one's kind of symbolizations or symbolic the experience, and certainly the totality of all phenomenological realities, in my earnest view, cannot account for the notion of gender essentialism, especially when we take account all possible gender. Especially when we take into account all possible hyper subjective and hyper objective realities phenomenologically that can never exist in the absolute infinite plurality of consciousness, get geististically across the set of all omniverses. So maybe one should really be an omniversal kind of possible world realist in regard to the essentiality of any gender. It tends to perpetuate itself across all pan phenomenologies. So thank you. Anyways, and I hope this talk kind of opened your eyes a bit to the notion that kind of omniversal modalism sometimes transcends any form of essentialism, whether it be, gender essentialism or aletheological essentialism. And it's important that contrapositive logic challenges these kind of Jungian integrational theories and doesn't essentially prescriptivize what cannot be prescribed phenomenologically and panphenomenologically across all possible worlds. So, to cut it short, I would say that within the context of the omniverse and all possible panpsychic beings and all possible consciousness that may be absolute infinity multiplicity, I argue that a true kind of omniversal gender sensuistic ontology faces kind of the hexides and quiddities that really challenge it via the quantum fluctuations of all possible pan-actualism. And being a pan-actualist, I argue, may very well challenge gender essentialism to the core, especially when we talk about all possible consciousness across the omniverse. So, thank you, everyone, and God bless you. And I hope, assuming you believe in God, but anyways, universe, omniverse bless you, and may you have a wonderful day. Thank you.